Hello, my name is Lenton. I'm a second year medical student at Warwick University. I studied biomedical science before this at Durham, and I've also done a master's in immunology and immunotherapy at Birmingham. In terms of what my biomedical course covered, it was a fairly comprehensive overview of biomedicine as a whole, really. We didn't focus on one specific area. Slightly different in that the first year was just biology in itself, so we still did all the plants and other boring things. I'm sorry if I've offended any ecologists out there, but after that we started focusing more on human biology, so genetics, immunology, which kind of fostered my interest in that, molecular biology, anatomy, physiology, not necessarily so much anatomy, but getting into the more meaty things. And then in third year we finished off with a literature review and a 6-week lab project. I think it was just on about cell development, nothing major. The master's was much more involved, looking at immunology as a whole, really. So we're focusing on every single aspect of it, from how the immune system recognizes things, how the innate immune system works, how the adaptive immune system kind of follows on from that, and how the two link together, and ways that we can kind of modulate it and control it in terms of applying it to various therapies, especially focused at cancer and chronic diseases, which is really, really interesting.
Is a master's something you would recommend if people are perhaps unsure of what they want to do after their bachelor's degree?
For me, the master's was both an insurance policy, and also because in terms of where I was when I was applying for medicine, if I wanted to apply for medicine during the biomed degree, I would have had to have done it based on my second year results, which for various reasons weren't quite at the 2-1 level. I eventually finished with the 2-1, but it meant that any application that I did would probably have gone under the radar and I wouldn't have been successful. So I applied for the immunology masters at Birmingham because it was an area which genuinely interested me, and there's a lot you can do with a MSc regardless of the content type, and you can go into other fields at a higher level anyway, and it still opened up the possibility for a PhD further down the line. I realised later doing the Masters that a research degree wasn't actually what I wanted to do in the first place. It was very lab intensive and I just didn't agree with all the pipetting.
Could you tell us all about a time you remember from your work experience in palliative care, one that's really stuck with you?
So the whole palliative care experience, I think, actually had more of an impact reflecting on it and looking back, because at the time I didn't have the medical knowledge to really appreciate what I was seeing beyond the basic human interaction. So I got to see conditions, including the various different kinds of cancers and metastases, which now would have a medical significance for me. It'd be quite interesting to kind of go back and see them again, and that's part of the experience you get in phase 2, at least here. But the things which stuck with me was it was the realization, although the role that I had was relatively small, I was a healthcare assistant. I wasn't trained in the same way that you would be in a hospital, where they arguably have a much bigger role. Although that's definitely not to belittle the work that the healthcare assistants there had to do, because it was intense in a different way. It was the emotional strain that it had on you. You realised that every little bit helped, and everything that you did had a positive impact in a really vulnerable time in somebody else's life, and a really painful time in somebody else's life. And just by being there, a kind word, holding their hand when they were struggling, when they were in pain, making them comfortable, making them food, helping them to feed, it's made passing comfortable. And for me, that was incredibly rewarding. That was one of the things which kind of crystallized that this is really what I wanted to do.
What's been the most challenging part of the course so far for you?
The most difficult thing for me has been the sheer amount of information we've had to process so far, at least from an academic standpoint. As quite a few of my friends found themselves, I had to resit first year. Not the whole year, but I had to resit the exams, and that was 3 weeks worth of extra work, which cut into the summer break. That was stressful, and also meant that the brain drain by the time we started second year wasn't quite as pronounced as some of my other peers, so it actually turned out to be a little bit of a positive. In a non-academic standpoint, earlier this year I was actually diagnosed with type 1 diabetes.
Have you found that there's been a lot of overlap between the core content of your biomed degree and the first year of med school?
The most challenging area for me, I think, as I might have mentioned before, was just the sheer amount of information that we're expected to know. The things that we were learning were familiar, at least for me, but everything that you do has got a different spin on it, and it's got a different focus, and the way that you apply it is different. I think what's inherently interesting but also challenging about medicine is that the stuff that you learn in the lectures and the stuff that you learn with your reading, the way that you get examined on it isn't necessarily just the regurgitation of that information, unless it's the more social and population study style of things, or learning about medical law. That is fairly rote, but it's learning what happens in various scenarios, applying physiology, what goes wrong in pathophysiology to different disease states, and kind of problem solving in your head with the knowledge that you know to come to a correct answer in a question. So again, it is less about what you know and more about how you can apply what you know, if that makes sense.
Have you had any thoughts about specialty?
Specialty. Personally, GP, regardless of what anyone says when they go into it, is probably always going to be an option, unless you really, really don't like it. It has got variety, and you can develop that patient relationship, which is something which I'm quite keen to do. But when you do work in hospitals, it is quite an attractive environment, at least for me, because I don't necessarily want to be stuck behind a desk in the same room every single day for the rest of my life. I think at least a hospital is big enough that I can kind of get that variety in the space. In terms of specialties, I find dermatology really interesting. I find it links quite nicely in with what I've learned before with immunology, especially from the allergy component of it. And it also kind of brings in the good work-life balance that I do ideally want, and the surgical aspect as well. You can do minor surgery in dermatology without any problem. On the flip side, I'm quite a hands-on person. Orthopedics, as much as I probably fit that stereotype, is a very, very interesting area. And I think the idea of kind of going in there, but based on your anatomical knowledge, whacking away with hammers and saws is quite primal, isn't it? It's always going to be quite fun if that's the thing that you're interested in.
What's been your favourite part of the course at Warwick so far?
So in terms of what Warwick has offered, I have to confess that I've never really been a hardcore academic. I mean, I've succeeded academically, I can't deny that, but I've never particularly had the absolute thirst for knowledge some of my friends have. It's always been an effort, and it's always been hard work, and it's never particularly come naturally. So for me, the best experiences have been the hands-on practical ones, either around the hospital and training with my friends, and also the interactions that I've had with them kind of outside that. So one of the things we do at Warwick is the review, where we take a load of things that we found particularly funny or interesting over the year and make a comedy show out of them. The rugby here is a really, really, really fun club. Very tight bunch of guys, and the support that they offer is beyond just a sportsmanship. They help with the tutoring for the other people in the rugby club. They offer pastoral support if we're struggling. It's the connections that I've made here and the opportunities which have been available which I've found more rewarding than just learning about the medicine.
What can younger students studying biomedical sciences as their first degree, what can they do to make themselves more competitive for medical school?
So there's the obvious angle, which is get at least a 2-1. Don't worry necessarily about getting a first. If you can do it, great. If you can't, it doesn't really matter in the long run. Even in terms of the rankings, when you finally get through and you're applying for FY1 positions, it doesn't matter. There's an exam that you do right at the end, which has got a much higher weighting compared to anything that you will do up to that. So if that's something that's on your mind, don't worry about it. Get experience working hands-on with people, if you can. I mean, again, it varies from university to university. At Warwick, they have a policy where you need to have at least when I applied, it was 70 hours worth of work. This didn't have to be medically related at the time when I applied, but it helped. Things which help you grow as a person. I know that's kind of a cop-out answer, but if you can get experience working with people, working in a team, and if at all possible in a medical area, and just get some exposure into the field, then that I think would be really, really useful, because then you could draw on those experiences, reflect on those experiences, and kind of correlate that to what the GMC want in a doctor, and you can kind of create your interview answers based around that. I personally didn't do the travelling. That's not a problem if you decided to do that. You just need to relate everything that you've learned back into how you've developed as a person. Most important, just do what you love, do what you find interesting, and do what helps you grow, and it will come through when you're talking to people. The experiences that you've had, you will sound more confident, learned, whatever you want to say. It will come through. Just do what you enjoy and keep it relevant if you can, and if those two areas kind of coincide, and that's just brilliant.
If you weren't studying medicine, what do you think you'd be doing instead?
I would be doing something completely different. I would probably be an interior designer, of all things. It was design and technology, systems and control. I don't know if anybody watching has actually done that A-level, but it was working with microcircuits and designing a product and marketing a product, building it up from scratch and letting your creative vision kind of come forth. That is actually what comes naturally to me versus the academia. If I wasn't doing this, I would probably have set up a wood workshop by now and be making things and using the hands-on skills, which I would like to apply to orthopedics, making some furniture and making pretty colours match together, and kind of having a really nice house that I built myself. That's where I'd end up being.
I'm paraphrasing slightly from a question a viewer sent in, but to your knowledge, are students continually working to enhance their CVs and get experience while at medical school, and is there opportunity to do that at Warwick?
There is definitely opportunity to do that with the various societies on offer here at Warwick. Whether or not you personally would have the time to do that is completely up to you and your working style and how easily academia kind of comes to you. Yeah, personally, I never really had time for it because there were other things which I felt that I needed for my own mental health, which kind of took priority, really. It was very important for me that I carried on the rugby, that I carried on the sport, and that I tried to keep fit and healthy. I know that hasn't really worked out with the diabetes, but what can you do? Every little bit helps. And for me, that was more important. You will get experiences and you will get chances to practice and do almost anything that you want to do just by going through medicine. If you want to be a high-flying consultant in a specialist area down in London, maybe that is actually necessary for that. But for the vast majority of people, no matter where you do your FY1, FY2 placements, how you perform on those and the contacts you make during that time will be far more important than what you do during medical school. That will kind of get forgotten, like your GCSEs have been forgotten now. And if you're a graduate entry medic, like your A-levels have kind of been forgotten as well. It gets less important the further along you get. And as I said, the experiences that you get during your placements will stand you in better stead than the simple things that you can fill your portfolio with at the moment. But following on from that, I do have to say that before I even came to medical school, I have got my name on a paper already. So the pressure is kind of off for me in terms of getting that. It's in an endocrinology. It's in endocrinology. It's in something to do with your hormones. It's actually looking at fatty liver and the effects of statins on that and liver function tests, which isn't necessarily the area that I want to go into. So is that going to be relevant for me further on, apart from points to FY1 and FY2 placements? No, it's not. So again, you can spend the time trying to get these extra things, but just make sure you get the core thing there as well, which is surviving medical school and doing it in one piece.
All right, Rich, weird question, but what's your favourite medical exam to perform and why?
Favourite medical exam? Favourite medical exam is probably the gastro exam. It was the first exam that we learned how to do, and I think that always kind of holds a special place in your memory because you practiced it for the longest, so you're more comfortable with it. Gastro was the first ward that I was on when I was doing when I started my clinical training in phase 2, and it's also the one which I've heard the most pathology in. So there's one woman who came in with suspected colon cancer actually, because she had a stricture and she had bowel obstructions, and there's a phenomenon with bowel obstructions that you get this wind chime like sound with them. You get this tinkling, this glass tinkling, and I think, how on earth does that, how on earth can your bowels make that noise? They gurgle and they make other cruder noises. But lo and behold, we were listening in those areas. We couldn't hear bowel sounds. We put the stethoscope right at the top, and clear as day. It was like little bells, really, really high-pitched bells, just chiming, and it was really, really cool. Also, you get to tap, you get to prod, you get to poke, and who doesn't love doing that? Well, thanks very much for listening. If you've got any questions, feel free to email me. I'm sure that'll be put in the description below. Just best of luck with your applications. I really hope it works out for you.